Happy heresies. And yeah, welcome to the desert of the real. Welcome to Aeon Byte. Welcome to this age of Hermes, this Philip K. Dick world, and these Gnostic times. I hope everybody's doing well on this moon day and happy St. Patrick's Days. Happy St. Patrick Days for those of you who celebrate. This is as green as I found in my closet, and yeah, shame on my Irish heritage, but so it is. But I hope everybody's having a good time. I hope everybody's well. And yes, we are not the final authority on anything, but we hope to be an endless possibility for everything here at AM Byte. You are the final authority and, and always will be. And as Julian of Norwich said, all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. So be well, especially when you find your purpose and your destiny and who you are in this simulation. And my name is Miguel Connor. I am your Pompatus of Gnosis, and always so happy to see you on this podcast. And I'm also very happy to once again have back Susan Chang, this time to discuss her new book, Four Stories, The Elemental Approach to the Tarot. Yes, of course. As you can
I'm
see,
very impressed.
a lot of notes. And welcome, Susan. Good to have you back.
Oh, it's always great to be here. I feel so much better about myself and the world after your introduction.
Well, you have spread a lot of light, pat yourself on the shoulder. I think
Oh,
the
gosh,
gods and the
thanks.
spirits must be proud. They have use of you. So the best, sometimes I think the best we can do is be vessels for something greater and don't ask too many questions, right?
Don't ask too many questions, indeed.
And with us too, it's always a delight to have Graham Pong. Moondog Vance is busy with his day job. Hopefully, he will join us next week. But Graham, how are you doing? And thanks for being here. And happy St. Patrick's Day to you.
Oh, thank you. I tend to think of it these days as official Irish Cultural Appropriation Day.
That is true. That is true. I think the Irish is the one culture that we invite you to steal from us and change things. And just everybody's Irish today. So
Us Irish, we love a good party. Why can't we celebrate yours too?
yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah. Very simple. So, well, awesome, awesome. Not much on the housekeeping. I wrote a couple of notes. This is a normal podcast. It's not behind the paywall. Some of them will be. If you have any questions for Susan, please super chat them, though, so we can separate them and get them to you from the crowd in the chat room. Yes, and please support AM Byte, like, subscribe, share with your friends, and we got some good shows. This week we got Saul Luckman joining us, and next week we got my friend Mitch Horowitz to talk about his new book. So we're gonna have a lot of fun. Talk a lot about rock and roll and punk beyond mysticism. So good times, everybody. A spring join us, and Persephone is back to work. We miss her. We miss her. She's a good goddess of death, right, Susan?
Oh, she's the best. It's great to have her back in the house.
In some way or another. So awesome. Well, tell us, Susan. Again, I certainly advise you to get Susan's book. I have a copy of The Living Tarot. It is in my shelf. An important book, even though when it comes to this household, Susan, I do the I Ching primarily. My wife is the tarot reader. She's
Oh, how
a
about
very devout Catholic that cannot say no to the tarot. It's called her.
that?
She does the
Well,
tarot.
two diviners in the family. I suppose nothing comes as a surprise.
Yeah, but we don't ask too many questions. So awesome. Well, tell us about this book and why you decide to write it.
Oh, yeah. Four stories. Yeah. So this actually has its genesis way back in the before times. It was like, it started out in, remember I was doing the Fortune's Wheelhouse podcast
Yeah.
with Mel Moline, and we had a lot of great conversations there. And, uh, I remember in one of the episodes, it was like the Two of Cups or the Three of Cups, not too far in, Mill had said, well, I sometimes wonder, does the Fool have something to do with all of the Swords cards? Because the Fool is elemental air, Swords are air cards. Does the Hangman have something to do with all the Cups cards? And this just, set my brain on fire, like it does sometimes. And I just could not stop thinking about this. So I think it was in 2019, I started trying to create in my mind, a castle in the air, a grand unified theory of how these elements might all kind of puzzle together, right? And then I did a workshop on it at Northwest Tarot Symposium in March of 2020.
Oh, wow.
You
Talk
remember that?
about
Yeah, we were all
the
like,
hammer.
elbow bumping and trying to figure out, like, there was a hand sanitizer next to like every place where you might shake somebody's hand. Anyway, so I did that huge presentation for me. Then I worked on it for weeks, and then I just like put it away, and and it seemed like such a waste to me, because this whole way of thinking about tarot as an elemental structure, a fourfold elemental structure, has really come to inform the way I read for people, the way I teach, the way I do my own divination and my own cards of the day. So I thought, well, it's time. Next time I have a chance to write a book again, I will give Four Stories the airing it deserves, and that's how that happened.
Awesome. And you decided to self-publish versus go to a publisher. Well, any reason
Exactly.
for that, or
Yeah, there's a very good reason. So the only other major thing I've self-published is 36 Secrets. And 36 Secrets was my Deccan book. So it's all about the minors of the tarot. And it was such a great experience. I love the process of making books. I come from a book background myself. It's like grew up in publishing, first jobs in publishing. My dad was a publisher. So I really loved just the process. I love, having this thing that's stuck in your head. The worst part is the writing, but once that's over, it's all fun. You get to design things, you get to find pictures, you get to make a cover, and then the great thing about Lulu, which is the platform that I publish on, is that, it's print on demand. So anytime that you want to publish, it's literally just clicking a button, or update a file, click a button. So I actually first heard about Lulu from Chris Warnock, who does Picatrix on Lulu. And I was like, wow, that looks fantastic. Why not? So I really do love publishing with Llewellyn, my mainstream publisher. And, Living Tarot was through them, Tarot Deciphered, Tarot Correspondences. But these two books are kind of special to me. And 36 Secrets, was something that was so community based in a way, because all the astrologers were talking about decans, and we were all still waiting for Austin Coppock's 36 Faces edition. And and I found that I just had things to say about decans and tarot and astrology and all that. So Four Stories is really essentially a sequel, to 36 Secrets, because it's whereas 36 Secrets really focuses on the numeric minors, Four Stories takes a step back, and it incorporates, elemental majors, and zodiacal majors, and all of the minors. I have things to say about the aces. I have things to say about the court cards. So this is kind of the everything else book for me. I think the only thing that's not in there is the planetary majors. So it's like, 78 cards minus 6 or 7.
yeah, you yourself say whenever you're doing a drawing or a spread, you may use different avenues like Kabbalah, or you imagine, you get a feeling.
Yeah.
The elements are in every time you use the deck. That's how
Yeah.
it is for you.
They're just fundamental to my understanding of tarot now. And that as a diviner, that the process of becoming a diviner is essentially building a map in your head of the cosmos, and then having a way to externalize it. And, I don't think I have a choice at this point. I can't take the elements out of that understanding at this point. You'd have to unweave my brain. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think with the I Ching, the more I do it, the more it tells me I'm wrong. I think
Well, I do. I love the I Ching as well. I find it's very advicey though. It's very much like one of my aunties.
yeah, there's no grand romantic scheme. It's like, get your ass in gear. This is what's happening.
Stay humble.
Yeah, very much. Oh my
They're big
God,
on that. Yeah.
wonderful for
I
my
don't think there's a single hexagram where it's like, why don't you just recognize you're a big shot and act like it? You just don't see that in the I Ching.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the old speaking of St. Patrick's Day, it's not the idea you have an Irish mom because you think she's a virgin and she thinks you're God. It's not
That's great.
no, it brings you down to size. Brings you down to size. And for the somebody who purchases your book, and of course you deal with this early, how should one use this book if you're a tarot reader? What's your thought?
Yeah. So, my belief is that I was actually just talking about this with my husband over dinner because he's a casual tarot user. He's sort of like he had a deck. It's mine now, but he had one at one time. And and so part of it was just like, how do I even remember, if I know that all wands are fiery, how do I tell them apart? Just a really simple question like that is something to begin with. And you can say that, what I do in this book is I provide kind of a substructure, infrastructure, a scaffolding for understanding stories that involve those cards. So if you have the five of pentacles, this becomes a story about the 5, 6, and 7 of pentacles, which are all related to the sign of Taurus, as is the Hierophant card, which is itself within the larger element of earth, the fixed component of earth. And you can tell a story about that, about, in my case, I tell a story about the myth of white buffalo calf woman who, saves the Lakota Sioux from starvation by giving them the 7 rights of civilization. And to me that is so perfect for those cards, 5, 6, and 7 of pentacles. You see this trajectory of someone fearing destitution, poverty, starvation, right? And then finding an intermediary who can help them, and then forever, faithfully following these rights in the belief that this will, preserve their well-being. And and it's also it's to me the center of the earth story, right? Which is this idea of continuity and stability, because earth in general, these stories are about reproduction and rebirth and the survival of the species. So it allows you to have a sort of a place to slot the card and its larger story into. But more than that, it's also like when you are doing readings for people, you can kind of see what story they're in. I mean, they will tell you, they will tell you, if they say something like, I always say for an earth story, the person's going to be like, I have a lot going on, and because they've got work, they've got their hands in a million different pockets, they're project managing here and there and everywhere, or if someone's in a water story, you can this is a question I get from my clients all the time. They'll say, I just feel like I need to be in a more intuitive field. There's no meaning in what I do, right? I need to feel my heart feels empty, right?
Mm.
So elements give you a sense of, in the same way that our classical philosophers thought that the four elements were the makeup of everything physical around us.
Right.
I think that you can make an argument, or at least I try to, that, the four elements are also metaphysically, the totality of everything we perceive.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think the underpinning of the book is, yes, the idea that at the end of the day, what makes us human is not facts or even predictions or the future. It's stories. We are made of stories. We resonate with stories. We understand stories. Somebody can tell us,
Yeah.
stealing is bad. We'll go, oh, but if we watch a grand movie, we get it. It's just the way the human imagination is. We're still not linear. We're still, most of our
Right.
brain is still in the area of images and myths and hieroglyphs. We haven't advanced. So that's,
Yeah.
I would say, that's the way out. That's the way through. And that's what your
Hmm.
book tries to show. Where am I
We
in this grand story, this grand archetype, and what can this archetypal story or myth teach me?
Exactly. We are built for metaphor. And the great thing about story is that, like, it's a story. It doesn't necessarily have to have a message, right? It's not, none of these myths are necessarily explicitly moral myths, right? They simply tell you the consequences of what's going to happen, and you get to decide for yourself, right?
Right. Yeah, it's like that Lakota story. It's a really beautiful, powerful story. But of course, it starts,
Yeah.
there's actually two people who find the white buffalo. There's a
Mhm.
beautiful woman, and one guy tries to, do
Mhm.
things he shouldn't be doing, and he gets destroyed. I was like, good lesson. Don't go messing around with God and stuff in the wilderness. So,
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and the second scout, I mean, he approaches her in a spirit of reverence, but he's also no fool. I mean,
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it always reminds me of the story, Susan. There's a rabbi, and he's telling his son before bed the story of the flood, and
Yeah.
his son goes, well, Dad, did that really happen? And the rabbi goes, well, I don't know if it happened, but I know it's true. It's that
There
little
you go.
subtlety.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And it all comes down to the monomyth, it seems, right? Our journey is the fool's journey. Our journey is this
It's
journey through.
true. It's true. And, I think that's why these stories are so familiar in a way, because whether you're going through, ace through 10 in fire or water or air or earth, there's this very familiar trajectory, where there's always a crisis or transaction right around what we would call six in tarot, right?
Mm,
Where something turns around. Maybe it's an enantiodromia is what the Jungians would call it, but there's a change of direction.
right.
And and whether it ends like the 10 of swords or the 10 of cups, it's still the same overall journey.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is true. It is true. Yeah. The tarot is a living thing. I don't know if you've heard this story, and I know forgive me for getting sidetracked, but as you're thinking, I and my wife and I and our friend did the Gnostic tarot. The tarot is changing, but
Yeah, looks amazing.
oh well, thank you,
Yeah.
very much. Yes, and it's done this job. My wife uses it. She
Yeah.
was always a Crowley deck person,
Mhm.
but it's worked. People are getting the results. They're going on the journey, and they're learning about the Gnostic mythology at the same time. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we're very happy with it. But I was in chess.com. My son, who we were talking about, he's 11. He likes to play chess. Some
Mhm.
things are starting to
Yeah.
beat me at chess.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome for him.
but they put out a social media post saying we need advice because we want to change the name of the bishop. I was like, what? The bishop's politically incorrect now? What happened? So
Yeah, I get it. I get it. But why just the bishop then?
yeah, I was like,
Right?
there's others.
Blow up the system while you're at it.
Yeah, just make a modern one, which I'm sure some people have done.
Just why don't we make it like the fruit chest? It's like, here's the pear, and pear takes apple.
Yeah. But then you learn, I mean, chess actually came from India and it was completely different, the names, and then it went to Persia, and
Yeah.
you learn a
Yeah.
lot. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so you
Yeah,
find it.
and you get the feeling that it was really a political didactic tool for the, young ruling class.
Hmm. Exactly, exactly. And on another little detour, we were talking, you and I, on Messenger about Bowie. So, of
Oh
course, that
yeah,
led
right.
me through a rabbit hole, and I found all these celebrities that use the tarot. I never really asked, just like I don't ask what
Really?
celebrities use
Yeah. Yeah.
the tarot. And I found, here's the list, and let me know if
Oh, let's
you,
hear it. Yeah.
all right, or is somebody in the chat, please let us know. But people, famous people or notable people who use the tarot: Salvador Dali, Alejandro Jodorowsky, H.R. Geiger. That's not surprising. Sting used it, but it got really dark. He started summoning dark things. So Sting quit the tarot.
No kidding.
Yeah, Christina Ricci, Beyonce I hear, Cyndi Lauper, J.K. Rowling's, and those are the few that I heard. Like, so people
That
that.
makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, yeah, yeah. I think though every celebrity in 5, 10, 20 years is going to be using the tarot because all the kids are using it now. I mean, like everyone has a tarot deck among my students, and
Mhm.
they have so much more access than we did when we were young.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
different choices. So,
Yeah.
and talking about Bowie, it made me laugh because Bowie did use the tarot. I just my biography on Elvis is coming out. He was also just the
Yeah.
oldest. Bowie did the tarot, and there was a point in the late '80s where whenever somebody would reach out to him, CBS or it didn't matter, he would ask him their birthday and he would do their astrological chart and do a tarot reading. That's how he decided
Wow.
whether he would give him an interview. It wasn't because they were from Rolling Stone or anything. It's like he
I
let
would
the
love to know what his criteria were, his
yeah,
astrological criteria. Can't know, what his views on the tarot were and what card they got, but that would be great to know too.
yeah.
To be
So
a
he
fly
was
on the wall, man.
he was into it, and he was also into the cut up
Oh
tradition
yes,
from
yes, yes.
the
The
diet.
surrealists were into that.
That's
Yeah,
it,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
he got that from William Burroughs. Most people
Mhm.
don't know that Stanley Kubrick was a huge cut-up guy. People think, "Oh,
Yeah,
he's such a perfectionist." No, he and his partner
yeah.
would cut up the screenplay and just throw it together. That's how he got Stanley Kubrick movies. He wasn't a control freak.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
mistakes, but Bowie was the same way, and a lot of albums like Diamond Dogs and others, all his lyrics are just again cutting them up and throwing them together. And he they ask him, well, why did you like it? And he said, uh, it's a sort of it's a very Western tarot. And I'm sure it sounds good to the journalists, but we're thinking like versus the East, versus
Yeah.
the Eastern tarot, David. What are you talking about?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it's interesting that they had this attraction to the tarot, which we think of as like a set of archetypal images, but don't you think that when someone like Bowie or someone like Elvis ascends, right? They become sort of archetypal images themselves. So, what does that say about, an archetypal image making use of a set of archetypal images? I think that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's the game that we're playing. One
Yeah.
thing I've learned about the 2 is I've realized if you want to change history, you gotta be P.T. Barnum, because those
Mm,
2 were showmen, they were bullshitters, they were just, especially Bowie. And it's so
mm.
strange because somebody is, again, P.T. Barnum, manipulative, all that. Yet at the
Yeah.
same time, his goal was to serve the outsider, the outcast, the minority. His message was honest because he himself went through a very hard childhood. He was a loner,
Yeah.
he was an
Yeah.
outcast. But
Yeah.
to get to the top, he had to play a hard game. That's why he would come up with BS terms like Western, a form of Western tarot. It sounds great.
Well, I think that the one thing we see in the world of celebrity is that, to live so close to the archetype is very hard on the human being, right?
It is.
You
Yeah, because
know? Yeah.
as Jung said, the archetype can possess you, and once it possesses you,
Yeah.
things aren't
Yeah.
going to go well. Like Elvis
Yeah.
and Bowie,
Yeah.
he almost died a few times. He was
Yeah. Yeah. No.
too close
Very
to the
true.
forces. All right. Well, thanks. Yeah, I just thought we should mention this, but let's talk about your book here. In fact, let me pull this up. Yeah, there.
Oh,
For
look at
those of
him
you,
doing his Kabbalah.
that's it. Yeah, yeah. If
Yeah.
you have any doubt that Bowie was not into the occult, there he is in the Sefer.
Yeah, and that's a hermetic, Kircher, Athanasius Kircher tree, not a Lurianic tree. So he's clearly knew his golden dawn.
Oh, very
Yeah.
much. He was very
Yeah.
much. Yeah, Crowley and all those cats. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
was, and he would do those because he got so paranoid. He thought Jimmy Page was had started a magic battle, so he would write these Kabbalah things all over his apartment and all that.
Wow.
So
Wow.
he
Yeah.
he went to some strange places. I don't even want to talk about when he. After that, he got into the Nazi occultism, which was
Oh,
like,
did
oh,
he?
David,
Oh God.
yes, yes.
Huh.
He couldn't help it. He liked their
Yeah.
style. He really thought they had the spear of destiny and all this
Yeah.
stuff. And
Yeah.
he went to East Germany looking for these things.
Yeah.
Well, the cocaine didn't help.
That's true. Yeah. But it seems like all we do in the 21st century is try to separate the art and the artist,
That's it. That's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So let's see. Here we have. You want to
Yes.
start with the story of fire? Tell us about.
Yes, that's the first of the elemental maps. And in fact, fire was kind of the hardest one for me at first because, it took me decades to have a take on the judgment card that worked for me. And, it comes with so much baggage. I mean, just look at the thing, and it took elemental reasoning to help me make a story about judgment that I could apply to my own, you know, relatively secular life, right? To me, if you look at that progression, so we call judgment elemental fire, and within elemental fire, astrologically, we've got our cardinal fire, Aries, the Emperor, our fixed fire, Leo, strength, our mutable fire, Sagittarius, the temperance or art card, strength or lust, and temperance or art, of course, if we want to speak Crowley. So, but what I see in that parabola, in that trajectory, is um, is is like a story of conquest, a story of striving, a heroic story, an epic story, the sense that you are the star of your own mythic life,
Right.
and that this is something that you start out with the ambition of the emperor, then you proceed into the public eye with the strength card. You become your This is associated with the idea of fame and the idea of being literally illuminated, right?
Mhm.
And then in the art card, which is such a complicated art or temperance card, such a complicated card, you connect with your own legacy, right? You connect with your own legacy. What is the legend that you're going to leave behind? And you can kind of see this in those 8, 9, and 10 cards. 8 is the message that goes around the world, and 9 is the sort of integration of that into a hero's journey, and 10 10 is what happens to all heroes. They either conquer or collapse, right?
Right, yeah.
The 10 of wands, people don't really think of it this way because of the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery looking so literally burdensome, but it is also a card of victory. So it's victory on the one hand and oppression on the other, and all of these kind of add up to the judgment card, because what do you do even in the sort of archetypal story of St. Peter? When you get to the pearly gates, you have to render an account. So this like entire process is you building a story that you can tell, right? When you're done, or that your children can tell about you.
Yeah, judgment is certainly the theme, and in your book, you give us again for the audience. She recalls these wonderful myths to relate them, and fairy tales too, because again, fairy tales are very important, just as important as myths. They get their own genre. But you bring in the myth of Heracles or Hercules, Gilgamesh,
Hercules, yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Jack and the Beanstalk.
Jack and the Beanstalk, exactly. And the resonances are just uncanny when you look at them in the light of tarot. But I mean, the Heracles myth in particular, I like it because it illustrates something that is, it's got so many of these elements of the fire story. It's got the miraculous birth, which is like a theme of fire stories, like literally didn't come from a human, right? And then these feats of strength and ferocity, and these things that no human can do. And at the end, he's literally apotheosized. He gets up into the stars, and that's the thing. Fire. One of the ways we talk about fire, or one of the ways that the philosophers thought about fire, was as the pure aezoon, the undying fire. That's Heraclitus, and
Right.
it's because fire gives us that motivation to be immortal, right?
Mhm.
And to go beyond this, this mortal flesh. And it's the thing. It's the undying spark in all of us.
Yeah, well said. And as some smarter people than me have noted, the story of Hercules is just the story of the sun going through the sky and the test through the zodiac and all that. So
Exactly. And he literally ends in the most Ten of Wands way possible, on a flaming pyre, on fire inside and out from the venom of an arrow, which is literally a wand, right? So, it's there are hints throughout the entire epic, of the fiery quality of this hero.
very true, very true.
Yeah.
So, Graham, let me bring you in. Do you have a question for Susan, or do you use any divination methods? What do you say, Graham?
Um, yeah, I was gonna say, as far as divination goes, yeah, I use the tarot. Rune stones are another favorite of mine.
Hmm.
I don't really consider the I Ching divination as much more of an assessment of the current situation and like the direction the current is going. Again, I don't find it gives me advice. But no, my question for Susan is my favorite tarot deck is the Dolly Universal, and he uses
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
it's a combination for me. I love Dolly's my favorite artist, and I love the tarot, but he uses a slightly different order in the major arcana.
He
I was
does.
curious
Yeah.
if you had thoughts into that one and what difference that makes and what adjustments you would make on that. Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. Those are called PIOB correspondences. They're used on the continent, PIOBB. And and he uses a really different set of zodiacal correspondences, although you can still apply the elemental reasoning to the four suits, of course. But I mean, I think that you can make that motor run. You can make it go. It's just that if you're committed to using that correspondence system, then you build your web over that correspondence system and you make it make sense. So, I use Golden Dawn simply because it's the lingua franca of the English speaking world as far as tarot is concerned, and it has all of this built-in astrology, which we already have a base level knowledge of. It's there, but you could make it work with the Dolly Tarot as well. You could absolutely do that.
Yeah, thank you. No, it
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense there. I
Mhm.
tend to view the tarot sort of almost, again, pulling in the Eastern thought, sort of the Atman to Brahman, the fool to the world, how the one
Mhm.
becomes the all.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's interesting that you said you don't think of I Ching as a form of divination. I can see that. I think of it as having being about timing, almost, the way that it gives you insight into whether it's the right time for a thing. And that's just kind of fascinating to me. I can see also how it becomes divination because, we are time bound creatures. We just on this earth while we're here. That's what we do, and that's and you could almost boil down any question to, is this the right time for this? So yeah.
Very true. Very
Yeah.
true. Awesome. Well, good question. And for people in
Thanks.
the audience, if you have a question, please super chat them. Susan knows more than anybody about this topic. All right, so let's get to the story of air. What's the story, Morning Gloria?
Air is my favorite. I am a huge fan of the Suit of Swords, me and nobody else. I just think it's so interesting. And, and the swords, the suit of air is kind of what makes us human. It's how we screw up all the time. And it's like what makes us different, right? Just different. And I mean, to me, in air, you have everything that happens up here, all of the sort of knots that we get ourselves into, which is why it's a suit of conflict as well as intellect. Those two cannot be divorced. Mm-hmm. So, the suit of air is, to me, about that fatal curiosity that we have as a species, and it's our ability. The very ability we have to think in metaphor is an air quality, right? As above, so below. Our ability to relate one thing to another. The only problem, of course, is that, like, once you begin thinking that air is all there is, then we have all of the problems of the modern age. In fact, Jung has this wonderful quote. He says, "When the age of reason arrived, the ego, identified with what I know, took possession of psyche's projections, and the fire chilled to air." Right? So there's, the fire in general is associated directly with the divine, right? With the pneuma and the sense of, of reaching for that divine connection. But air, we're the god in this room, right? It's very much that inflation of the ego and being oblivious to anything outside its own existence. So we have this really complicated relationship with the concept of knowledge. Is it corrupting, or is it healing? And we're constantly fighting that battle right from the beginning. So the overall story that I like to tell about air is, of course, the Garden of Eden story, because I think of this progression from the Justice card to the Star to the Lovers as being about that, how to I call it how to learn the rules, how to solve a problem, how to pay the price. Right. So, and that's exactly what happens there. The Adam and Eve find themselves in the garden, learning the rules of the garden. They're told exactly what they need to do. And then, in the Star, there's this like instinct, how to solve a problem. Is there something more than this? And the serpent figure is such an avatar of air, right? That but what if quality, that curiosity, that insatiable need to know, even if it hurts you, right? And that conversation with the serpent is what is, how I was talking about the transaction or the climax or the crisis at the center of the suit. The conversation with the serpent is that. And then we have the Lovers, which is, I made a choice and now I'm going to see what happened. Right. So, and I think it's really interesting that, that the minor cards show such a dark version of the consequences, whereas the Lovers cards, everybody's very excited to see that. But the 10 of it tells you that, like, the Lovers card is not as, it's not as simply happy and positive as it appears. All choices come with danger, right? And the 10 of Swords is not so bleak as it appears. Every time that you make a choice, you are cutting off half of the options at least for yourself, and that's simply the nature of choice. It's a privilege to have choice. So that picture of the 10 of Swords, I call that the one twin must die picture, because it's associated with Gemini, that whole thing. But, the whole lesson of Gemini is that one of those twins has to be mortal. One of them has to die. And that's how we live our lives, making choices and, giving up the possibility of endless options. Yeah.
And what would you say would be wisdom? Because obviously there's knowledge, there's logos, there's Sophia. Where is wisdom? The Gnostic said the serpent was wisdom in the garden.
Yeah. Well, I think that I locate wisdom actually in the Sophia figure of the world. Actually, it's sort of like, to me, the world card as the sort of elemental earth card, it encompasses not only the suit of pentacles, but like everything that came before. So earth is the recipient of everything else. It's the theory of 3 + 1, which we see in esoteric thought. There's 3, and then there's one that's special, and that's earth.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting. I think in the Gnostic Tarot, my wife chose the demiurge. But again, there's no wrong answer. I mean,
very interesting.
Yeah, and I wonder and she didn't see the demiurge even as negative for some reason.
Yeah, that's a take.
Her take, he wasn't negative. So
yeah. No, I love that. Yeah.
And you put also the myth of Inanna.
I did, as the central. Yeah, I think that, just looking at the star card, you instantly think of the descent of Inanna. This naked goddess by the river. And even I believe the star of Inanna is depicted on the star card. So again, there's that katabasis anabasis, kind of trajectory in the center of the suit. And what's funny is that you never really know. I call the central part of air how to solve a problem. You never really know what the problem is with Inanna. It's kind of a MacGuffin.
Oh, why did you do it?
Why? Just because. Why climb the mountain? Because it was there. She just had to find out what was going on with her sister, Eresh Kigal. And, and so she, as everyone knows, the descent of Inanna involves her, casting off all her raiment and entering the 7 gates of the underworld, and and then meeting her sister and her twin, essentially, and getting killed, hung on a meat hook. After which she returns, and and this process of the rising of Venus again is the integration of the lessons of air. But what I love about the sequence in the Rider-Waite-Smith is not only can you literally see Inanna in the star card, but you have this whole journey mapped out in the 5, 6, and 7 of swords. The 5 of swords is like, I call it the card of exile, where you are in some strange place and, you don't belong anymore. And what does that mean? And, and the 6 of swords, that process of going down and then back up and finding something out that you didn't know before, right? For better or for worse. And then the 7, there's that, you're leaving, but you're also looking back at the same time. 2 things now, not just one. Yeah.
Wow, fascinating and well said. All right, well, let's move on to now we got the story of Earth. Oh, yes.
Yeah. The story of Earth, to me, is where it all kind of comes to rest, right? I use the story of Persephone as the overall story, because you have this the devil figure of Hades literally rapturing her down into the underworld, and then the marriage, the hero's gamas down of Hades and Persephone, which is, you could say the marriage of the conscious and unconscious is one way to look at it, and then you have the return. You have this this Gandalf-like figure who's searching, and that could be, that could be Demeter, dressed in a gray cloak, like she was said to do, searching for her daughter everywhere. It's also apt because it's the Virgo falls at that fall of the season, at the end of the season when the harvest is done. So there's a profound message about the need for darkness in these cards of Earth, and it's also interesting because for some reason these myths of Earth are always tied to the renewal of the feminine, mothers and daughters, whether it's a Shekinah figure or a Sophia figure or a Persephone figure. There's always someone who has to be redeemed in some way, out of a fallen world. So that's why I decided to tell the story of Cinderella, as my final story, in the 8, 9, and 10 of Pentacles. And I was like, I actually read this in the book. You'll probably think I'm crazy because the Hermit, what is the Hermit? What could he possibly have to do with Cinderella?
Yeah.
But I see it very clearly in the 8, 9, and 10. You've got this person working very, very hard in the 8, and then like being beautified and glorified in the 9, and then going to live in the castle and a life of abundance in the 10. And it's granted, it's a very capitalistic story, but I think there's a sense of satisfaction that perhaps comes from the resolution of the archetype, the idea that we're all going to keep going on and on and on. What Cinderella really is to me is a story about the continuity of the species, right? It's like king and queen become prince and princess become king and queen. The whole, at least in the original French version, the problem is that the king and queen do not have grandchildren, and they really want grandchildren, So they make the prince set up this whole ball. And in fact, instead of at the end of French fairy tales, they don't say they lived happily ever after. They say they married and had lots of children.
I see.
Which tells you about the French.
Yeah. Happiness is still up in the air.
Yes.
But like you said, the species continues, I guess.
The species continues, exactly. And which again is in that, in the sort of Ouroboros or wreath figure Vesica Piscis around the world, in the world card. Yeah.
Very cool. All right, let's move on to the fourth one. And now we go to water.
Water, yeah. I found water the hardest to write about, even though it's the one I felt most deeply, because I think it's because water is inherently inimical to words. Water is the dream space, water is the vision space, water is the unconscious, where we go every night to dream. But what I found, but it was actually the first story that came to me. It's the first one I really understood, because if you look at that progression from the Chariot to the Death card to the Moon, you can see it as a quest that forces you to give up the thing that's most precious to you, and then you rise transformed from that. Mm-hmm. So and to me, it's incredibly moving. The story I tell for the water story is the story of Odin, because, this is well, first of all, looks like Odin hanging on the tree, right? Like pretty much a photograph. So I call this progression how to meet desire, how to surrender, how to rise transformed, right? Mm-hmm. So for Odin, who had many different quests, there was he's a war god, he's a knowledge god, he's a Hermes, but above all, this feeling you get with Odin is that he just knew there was something beyond what you can see, right?
Mhm.
And while all of the other gods were content to hang out, drinking, eating the golden apples of
Right.
Idun and drinking mead, he was not satisfied with immortality, right?
Mhm.
And so it was this desire to connect with something bigger that drove him to sacrifice himself over the well of Mimir and to get the secrets of the runes. Again, that literally what looks like a death in the center of the story, and a transaction where he receives something in return for his sacrifice, and then to rise up transformed, to come into the understanding of something that is an alternate reality,
Mhm.
another way of looking at the world, a more real, a more full, I guess, way of looking at the world. And to me, that's a wonderful way of looking at the moon. The idea that there's that that there's dreams, that there's a reality that's true but not factual, as you were saying before. I don't know if it's accurate, but it's definitely true. That's the moon for you, right? Giving you truths that do not adhere to consensus reality, which can also make you a lunatic if you know go too far down that road. I think I really enjoyed the telling the story of Isis and Osiris for the death card.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because, to me, it's like it's got this it's got everything in it. It's got, the searching up and down the river in the morning of Isis in the Five of Cups, and it's got, the children who tell her where to find the tree where her husband's body is buried, and, you know, and the gift of receiving that back, and then her having like sex with dead Osiris, which is, I often think of the Seven of Cups card as the vampire card,
Ooh,
because it's got this very uh uh, sort of chthonic Venus qualities. Like, it's Venus in Scorpio, so she's an underground Venus. She's a decadent Venus. She's a Venus that's like just on the turn, right?
right.
So yeah, and then you see in the death card that this whole process has been to rise up renewed. And of course, Osiris becomes, at the end of this process, when he's finally had his funerary rites and he's been reconstituted and he's had the necrophiliac sex and they've had Horus and the whole thing, he becomes, his body, his body is the source of the grain rising up in the land, but his spirit, his essence, becomes the king, the judge of the underworld. And this to me is the sort of secret of death, that it has purpose, that it has meaning, and it's not just an end. So, as we can see, it's the middle of the story.
Very true. Yeah. I mean, some might say, well, water, people might have a problem associating with the male force or the moon. But a fact most people don't know is across the globe, most moon deities are male. No
Mm,
reason. We
mm.
know the famous ones, Artemis.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you're on the right, definitely on the right archetypal stories, or arena. You also mentioned Siddhartha too. That's part of one of your.
Yes, yes. As part of the 2, 3, and 4 of Cups, you can really see that that the Four of Cups is, again, literal photograph of Buddha under the tree. you know,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
and I'm sure that folks would have preferred that I tell like a swooping love story for the 2, 3, and 4 of Cups. I do that in the sword suit instead, because which is a little dark. But what is the story of Siddhartha than the story of coming to terms with desire? I mean, that is the whole game. And you can think of his upbringing in sort of the Cancerian shelter of wealth and royalty, uh, as as mm, the beginning point of those questions. And when we get to the um, Three of Cups, there's this moment where, you know, the Three of Cups is ruled by Mercury, and there's this moment in the story of Siddhartha where he starts circulating among the people, and he begins to communicate. He begins to see what is really happening all around him, and that's what leads him to the tree where he realizes the Four Noble Truths. You know, and one of the things that I really particularly liked in sort of the correspondences between that story and these cards is that, you know, you've got Four Noble Truths and Four Cups, because tarot loves to count. You know, it's like seven rights of, you know, Buffalo Calf Woman, Seven of Pentacles. You know, this happens all over the place, and you can, you know, it's not like anybody who authored the myth was trying to, you know, count cups in a tarot card, and yet these uncanny things just arise out of the collective. I just love it.
Yes, yes, yes. The myth, the archetypal myth. That's awesome. And you shared some other images.
Oh, my little woodcuts. Yeah. So when I was trying to decide what to illustrate four stories with, I have an obsession with these 15th century woodcuts. You know, I really love the style because I think it's kind of crude, but artful at the same time. It's so expressive, and you know, and it makes me think of, you know, you can really feel the pulsation of the elements through these woodcuts, because this is what this was the science of the time, right? So this is the one I used for Earth at the beginning of the chapter, because Earth really is our human world. You know, it is the built environment. It's everything we do with what came before. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we have,
And that's another Earth one, because I, you know, one of my little special things that I say all the time is Earth is special and different. The element is special and different. The planet is special and different. And this, I think that this woodcut just really captures that beautifully.
it does indeed. And
That's
what is
what
going
I
on
use
here?
for water, right? Yeah, yeah. This, you know, because water is the realm of feeling. I thought it would be really nice to have these two people, you know, feeling each other up in a bathtub. You know, no, but really, you know, having an emotional moment. Yeah,
Is this from the 15th century?
yeah,
They
yeah.
were
So
partying back
most of
then. Forget the
yeah.
Black Death. We're getting down.
Like most of these are literally from like 1490,
Oh
1480,
wow. Yeah.
1470. Yeah. Before the engraving,
Mhm.
before steel engraving. Yeah. And this is just a little picture of, you know, a little pure Aedzo for you, as ever living fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay.
Oh, yes, the Four Winds. Yeah. Yeah, so that's the one I use for air. Um, yeah, you know, and there's all this wonderful kind of mythos around air and birds and, you know, and language that all seem to go together. You know, you've heard of the green language, or the language of the birds, as being that sort of primordial magical language. And you know, this I think is an expression of the fascination we have as human beings with our own, you know, power to create through, you know, just what we say, through spell work and through speech. So yeah, but I just like the picture of the Four Winds.
Yeah, it's very nice. Awesome, awesome. Well, we've only done a fraction. You do have some exercises for you practitioners
Yes,
who want.
yes.
You want to
Mhm.
quickly speak to those?
Yes, yes. I thought it would be nice. I haven't really done this in any of my other books except the Living Tarot, but I thought it would be fun for people to get to know some of the elemental, you know, the cards from an elemental perspective. So I did sort of three spreads for each element, in order to kind of allow you to get to know them better. But the first spread I did, before even getting into those, was what I call the elemental story locator spread. So you get to draw three cards and see what story you're in. If it's mostly fire, you know, that tells you something. If there's a difference between the story you're in and the story you would rather be in, say you're in an earth story and you want to be in a water story, there's 3 positions in this thing. One is like, what story am I in? Then what story would I rather be in? And then how do I get there? So, there's news you can use in each of these positions if you kind of go into the elemental story behind it and see what it has to offer you.
Wonderful. Yeah, check it out. And have your, before we go, Graham, any last question or remark from you before we end?
No, I find it fascinating. I'm going to have to go over some of your works and see, the variations you find in the stories for the different elements, because I'm sure there's a pattern in between how they vary from element to element as well. So
that's very true. That's very true. That's a good observation.
No, thank you, and look forward to diving in deeper. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I have you on the show notes, your website. Send them to your website for your book. Susan, what is your website?
tsusanchang.com.
Very simple. tsusanchang.com. So that's where
you'll find it. I just want to say quickly that 4 Stories and 36 Secrets are both available everywhere. But if you follow the links on my website to pick them up on lulu.com, I do so much better. It's like, it's a fraction. Like I get $1 from Amazon if you buy from Amazon. So you're helping me out if you buy it from the source.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the link I use is Lulu, because then again,
awesome.
You'll do better. But can you get an ebook or Kindle?
There is no ebook of 4 Stories yet. I may do one. I did one of 36 Secrets. And in fact, I'm also making I've literally just published today, it's not available yet, a hardback of 36 Secrets because so many people asked me for it. But 4 Stories, I may get around to it, just not quite yet.
If it's meant to be. Awesome. Well, highly advise you guys get 4 Stories, a good read, good stories, and good everything. So, but we are at the end. First, I'd like to say, Graham, thanks for keeping us company during the spread.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure. It was wonderful to listen to Susan and bask in some of her wisdom. Thank you, Susan.
It's great to meet you, Graham.
Yes, Susan, as always, it's wonderful to have you on the show. It's wonderful to talk to you. And I hope we look forward to the next time, and good luck with everything.
Indeed.
And the season of Persephone.
Thank you so much, Miguel. I always enjoyed talking to you. And I can't wait for the Elvis book.
It's coming out, I think April 8th. So it'll be out.
It's around the corner.
Yes, it is. It is. Very excited. So I'll be doing my tour de force on podcasts. You know the drill.
Absolutely.
Awesome. For everybody else, thanks for being here. As I say, thanks for being yourself, your true self. And as always, write your own gospel, live your own myth. Until we talk again,